I just want to say that I'm so excited you are here. I came on your podcast recently and we had so much fun. You're one of these people, Misha, that every time I'm around you, my energy levels are raised. You're an amplifier. So I'm really grateful you are here. Welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you. I am so glad to be here. I feel the same, but I love that perspective you gave about me because it feels good, and I'm like, yeah, that's how I'm trying to live my life.
Well, you are doing it, my friend. And I want to be the first person in the history of the world to say your last name correctly. Mischa Zvegintzov.
Oh my gosh.
I,
Wow.
did I nail it?
You nailed it.
It's good. I was practicing in front of the mirror earlier, so good. So I think where I want to start today, I want to give people a little bit of an understanding about who you are, and you have such a powerful story. So I'm thinking we'll start with some of the story. We'll fast forward to the midlife crisis, the juicy parts that we love on the Dare to Dream podcast, and then we'll just see where the conversation takes us.
Love it. I think that's a great plan.
Perfect. Take us away.
Yeah, take us away. I got to go first. Well, let's see. I think one of the most interesting things about me, or I don't know if interesting is the right word, but I was addicted to drugs and alcohol at a very young age, almost out of the womb. And fast forward, enough trouble, petty crimes. This was back in Jackson, Wyoming in the 80s. The 80s. Wow, that's a long time ago. The 80s. And I had been put in front of Judge Horn. And Judge Horn is like the probation judge, right? You go on 1 year probation, 2 year probation, 3 year secret probation, what have you. I always say 3 year secret probation, and there's a few people out there that watched Animal House that know you're on double secret probation, right? Anyway, that's a reference to Animal House, but I had graduated to judge rank, and Judge Rank we like to call the hanging judge. He was like the go to jail judge, right? And Judge Rank said, hey, you can go to jail for 6 months, or you can go to treatment. What's it going to be? It's the last day of high school. And I was like, yeah, I think treatment sounds good. So I went to treatment and got clean and sober. And I honestly really don't care whether people are clean or sober. I just say that so that or the listeners know that I got involved in the 12 steps and 12-step modalities, which I think are so powerful in the world. And I have looked at my whole life since through the lens of the 12-step modalities as I've been clean and sober through that whole time. So you may ask a question or let me continue.
I really wanted to bring in that piece because you grew up in Jackson. You had an extraordinary upbringing, it sounds like. And a couple of places that I want to stop along the way are professional snowboarder and DJ in San Francisco. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. So it was very interesting. I grew up in Jackson, Wyoming, like I said, so skiing, all those sorts of things. In the 70s, I had seen in Sears magazine, back in the day, you would get the Sears and Roebuck magazine, and it had everything from, baby clothes to ovens to skis to what have you. And there was what was called what were they called? Snurfers. So in the 70s they had snurfers, and they predated snowboarding, but there were these yellow looking boards that had a rope on the front. So it was like a big ski, and you would just stand on it, no bindings or anything, and you would hold the rope and kind of lean back. And so in Jackson, Wyoming, we would do all these backcountry, so in my, when I was 9, 10, 11, 12 years old, I got the Snurfer for Christmas, picked it out of the Sears and Roebuck magazine. And anyway, we would snurf. And so fast forward, 1984, 85, 86, I get a snowboard, one of the original Sims snowboards. And at the time I get sober and I become obsessed with snowboarding. It was like a natural progression. So I start snowboarding, and side note about that, some of the fun things is a lot of the ski lifts in Jackson, Wyoming, if anybody's a skier. So it's the Tetons, all that, Corbett's Cooler, all that fun stuff. I was the first snowboarder on a lot of those lifts. And then the big race for all of us snowboarders at the time was who could, tag these ski lifts across the West to be the first snowboarder on them. And so a lot of these ski lifts throughout the West, I was the first snowboarder on. But I started snowboarding and was in the Swatch World Championship and did all those kinds of things and had varying levels of success. I'm 6'2" and I'm top heavy, so I have a big chest and super skinny legs, and my leg to torso ratio is not good for for athletics of that type, because I have a very high center of gravity, and so I professionally snowboarded for about 4 years, was in magazines, made enough to in effect sleep in my car.
Perfect.
Yeah, got ski tickets and I did have moments of fame, but I kept injuring myself, and I just worked really hard is the bottom line. Like, I worked hard, so I wasn't naturally gifted as an athlete, but worked hard, and so there you go.
Fantastic. And
Yeah.
we'll make a brief pit stop as a DJ in San Francisco. Was this just post snowboarding along the way to all the other things you were going to do?
Yeah, exactly. So I had finally, I'll try and keep the story short, or we will run out of time to get to the good stuff. But I kept injuring myself. And in my drug addicted youth, I had done really poorly in high school. And I thought, man, how am I going to do in school here? But I physically had beat myself up snowboarding. And I was like, I need to go to college. So got my finance degree out of Montana State University, ended up thriving in college, getting almost straight A's or whatever, which was great for that. But anyway, a buddy at Montana State, Eric, his name's Eric Hoffman. Eric was sort of on the forefront of the rave music, right? And so I've always been a little bit of a business guy, starting these little businesses. And so I saw him throwing these rave parties, and I was like, hey man, if we did some things, we could really blow this up, right? And so all of a sudden we have a little dance club, we're throwing parties, doing all these things, and we have a business. And after a few years, we decided to exit the business, and I was more of on the, the business finance side. Let's make this profitable. And he was into the music side. And when we were exiting the business, we had a pile of money and a whole bunch of equipment. And I had asked a mentor friend of mine, Steve, his name's Steve Burt. I said, hey, Steve, Eric and I need to exit this business, but sometimes I can over-negotiate or take advantage. And I want to make sure that I don't take advantage of Eric on the way out. And he goes, well, make two piles, one with the equipment and one with equipment and money, whatever he thinks equitable, and let him pick which he wants. I was like, hey, that's a great idea. So I'm assuming he's going to want the equipment and lights and turntables and everything, right? Because that was his thing. And so I make this pile of equipment and I throw in extra money because I'm like, it's got to be what he wants. And I don't want to take advantage of him. And so I'm like, Eric, which pile do you want? And he goes, I'll take the money only. I was like, wait, what?
And you go, oh, crap, time to become a DJ.
Time to become a DJ, yeah. So my mother, at the time I had my finance degree. I'd been out of college for a year, and we'd sold the business, so it was time to do the next things. And I was going to, with a finance degree, was going to go to Chicago, New York, or San Francisco to start, my whatever, live that dream. And my mother, who lived in Berkeley, and my stepdad Bob said, hey, we're going to Portugal for the summer. Do you want a house at our house in Berkeley? And I was like, question answered. I'm going west, further west. I randomly bump into somebody, and they're like, we need a DJ for a New Year's Eve party. And I was like, I can do it. I had never DJ'd a day of my life, but I had all this equipment, and they're like, good, you're hired. Paid me before. And I was like, I guess I'm a DJ. Yeah. So I'm in San Francisco Bay Area, just became a DJ and had a lot of fun in the mid to late 90s, I guess it is. And was, spinning at clubs and doing sound at raves and all this kind of stuff. Yeah. So that's how that happened.
Let's jump forward a little bit. You were in some sort of mortgage sales. Tell us what was next, but specifically, I want to land on the other side of all of that success.
Yeah.
You said something on a podcast I was listening to that the day you hit the number, your bank account hit the number, you thought it would be the number that finally brought you happiness. It was one of the darkest days of your life.
Yeah. Yeah. We'll get to that. So I'm DJing. I love DJing because I got to live the slacker lifestyle. I was basically working weekends, and not only was I doing clubs and little raves and things like that, but I was also DJing, house parties, but, sorority and frat parties, and I had this moment of clarity of here's the direction and the things I need to do to be a international DJ, or here's the path of what I need to do to have like a thriving, bar mitzvah, wedding, frat party DJ business. And in that moment, neither sounded appealing. And I was like, well, I've got this finance degree, so let's get after it. So I end up so I quit DJing, sell everything. It's sort of my history a little bit. I was like all into snowboarding, racing, having some success. And I was like, I'm done. Sell everything, drop away. Haven't snowboarded since, DJing. I'm all in, building this thing. Yeah, not for me. After 4 years, done, walk away. So I get into, I became a commodities broker, and I start dialing for dollars, hand dialing telephones to get retail commodities clients. And the commodities business is some of the riskiest markets in the world. Everybody loses money. But anyway, that's a whole nother side note. So I start learning my sales chops, dialing for dollars, boom, 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 right? Next thing you know, tech boom's in session in the San Francisco Bay Area. I get recruited to a tech firm to start selling tech stuff because they're like, oh my God, you will call anybody at any time. You're an animal, So great. And then I start doing door-to-door sales, like business to business. So I'm literally walking south of Market, San Francisco, to all these tech startups to sell them tech infrastructure, in effect, right? And I start having some success. I get a whole bunch of stock options, great salary, all this stuff. I'm rich. Stock options usually have a vesting period, and overnight, the dot-com boom crashed, 2000, I think it was, and all of a sudden my stock options were worthless, and actually wasn't that much, but at the time it felt like the world. And next thing I know, I can't get a job doing anything in tech because the whole market collapsed. Only job I could get was in San Diego, California as a mortgage broker because I knew somebody. This was 2001. I'll never forget it. December 2001. Only job I can get. And they're like, you got to come down to San Diego. And they were telling me, you're so good on the phones. You've got a finance degree. In the financial services, I had fallen in line with a bunch of computer traders, like the forefront of the computer trading models and stuff like that. And so I spoke this really good, I was really good at speaking this high level language, right? Finance and stuff. Anyway, so so I'm in mortgages and I'm dealing with CEOs, CTOs, general managers. It was like my niche because I was very smart, educated, savvy, could talk. I'm doing very well. And what happens is divorce, more failed relationships, career burnout. And, I was in mortgages for 15, 20 years and I'm good at it, and I've always had a service mindset, honestly. So I don't want to make it sound like I was just wreaking havoc out there. So I was really, my mindset, thanks to the 12 steps, has always been to serve. Like, how can I serve? What can I bring to the table? And so I start to burn out in mortgages and go through this divorce, and I'm trying to think of how to get to the point you want me to get to, but there's a lot of moving parts within the story. I know you're going to ask me about some other stuff, but basically what happens is this, is I lose everything through the divorce, find new success, and in my sales career, people will tell you, like, have a number in mind, have a goal, right? Like have something to work towards in that regard, right? So I'd always had a number that I was trying to hit, and that would relate to how much money I had in the bank as well, right? And so I was close, lost it all through the divorce. All right, I'm back on track, doing well. My parents die, both at the same time. They'd been divorced 35 years, but my mother dies of cancer. 2 weeks later, my father dies of a heart attack out of nowhere, and obviously a heavy day. But I inherited $2 million, right?
Whoa.
Yeah. And so what was so dark about it was, like, all of a sudden I had $2 million in the bank, and I was like, oh, and I'm still not happy, or that whole, I'm still not fulfilled, or I'm going to swear, I try not to swear too much. I was like, I'm fucked. Because I'm like, oh, I thought the number would be the thing, you know?
And what's so insidious and scary about that moment is that when you're on your way up, you're hoping that success and money and the accolades will fill that hole inside of you. But when you get that and the hole is still there, you're fucked. You are out of options and you don't know what to do next. And it's a problem that no one's going to feel bad for you about. Oh, you inherited $2 million and you're having a dark day. I mean, people can give you condolences for your parents for sure, but $2 million, come on. And so you're in this dark period. What happens next?
Yeah, that's such a great question. And, you know, my father was 73 when he died. My mother was 70. And my mother had always had this fear she was going to die alone. Bob was a lot older than her husband. And so she thought, you know, he's going to die and I'm going to be all by myself and broke and, like, living under a bridge. She grew up post-World War II, or through World War II. She was German. I say that because my mother was 70 when she passed away, surrounded by love. And it was very powerful for me, right? So cancer is obviously horrible, but at the same time, she, all of a sudden, her and Bob, when she gets that cancer diagnosis, and this will tie into your question, I'm giving you a real long answer. Her and Bob stopped fighting about everything. They're like, oh my God, life's short, right? Like, what are we fighting about? You know? And so I see their relationship transform, and over 2 years, their life becomes magical, right? Because now they're just, like, loving on each other, and they don't fight anymore, and everything's precious. You know, so to see that, it was like, oh my gosh. And then, you know, of course, she thought she was going to die alone. She doesn't. Just love, family, friends, amazing. My father had thought he was going to die. My father was a outdoorsman, mountain man, skier, snowboarder, skier, ski instructor, fisher, a river guide. You know, he had retired somewhere along the way, and that's what he did. He ski instructed and was a river guide, like a riverboat guide, you know?
He was the full Wyoming mountain man.
Full Wyoming mountain man. And he thought he was going to die on the couch, losing his mind, not being able to to like live a healthy lifestyle, right? And so, although tragically he's 73 hiking in the mountains with a woman he loved, what's called Glory Bowl in Jackson. It's beautiful outside of Wilson, Wyoming. But he's hiking in this favorite place, heart attack and dies, right? And it's like his fears were unfounded, right? He's like, these powerful lessons I'm seeing, right? And so all of a sudden I've got $2 million in the bank, plus everything that I was good at work became painful. Like literally everything I was good at in home loans became painful overnight. And so for 2 years, I've got all this money in the bank. I'm divorced. I'm a single dad. My kids are having, some turmoil because there's divorce going on and naturally what happens. And I'm like, God, universe, give me another job because mortgages are painful, right? I'm like, give me the next thing to do. Give me the next thing to do. Like, give me that new career as I'm struggling in home loans. And I had been in home loans, the guy that was like, work hard, smile, add value, like be positive at the sales meetings. Like if you were negative and you were at a sales meeting, I was like, what are you doing here? Why are you wasting our time? Like, you know what I mean? And overnight I was like, this sucks. Like I hate mortgages, people in their houses. And I became the negative guy at the sales meetings. And I'm seeing it, right? Because thanks to the 12 steps and all that, I'm very self-aware and growth-oriented. So I'm start to become this person that I don't want to be. And I bump into Kyle Cease. I know you have a Kyle Cease question on there, so I can weave Kyle into it if you want me to.
This is the perfect time because I heard you mention Kyle Cease was someone who played a pivotal role in your life. And when I went to Google him, my computer showed me that I had already looked him up. And so I pull up his page and I can't remember for the life of me who told me about him. I think it was a client who was looking at some of his stuff and was like, hey, can you check it out? So I'm selfishly very curious about Kyle, but let's hear how he played a role in your life.
Yeah.
And who is he? What does he do?
Yeah.
For some context.
Yeah. Kyle Cease at the time, and I think he still has it. He was doing these events called Evolving Out Loud, EOL, Evolving Out Loud. And, I had, interestingly, just to give you and the audience a complete picture, being sober and doing the 12-step stuff and being really focused on ego reduction, because ultimately that's how we are able to stay clean and sober. Some people believe, I would believe it as well, right? It's like you have to find some sort of connection to some kind of a higher power, whatever that is, and then you clean house, which means you start learning how to take accountability for your actions. Like, what's my part? Whenever that pain and anguish comes in, it's like, what is my part, right? And then you clean house and you make amends if you need to. And then the last little bit is service, right? So it's all this ego reduction stuff. And again, as I said, so like before I come here to speak on your show, I'm like, hey, God, how can I be of service? What can I bring to the table? And I say God loosely. That's just like universal, whatever you want to believe, right? It's like, hey, how can I be a channel? How can I be of service? And so my dad dies. He was a big yogi. Being a good son, I was like, there's not enough space in the yoga world for the both of us. Right? So as soon as he passes away, I'm like, oh, my father was a single dad. I'm like, oh, I see why he was all into yoga and meditation and all this kind of stuff. And I was like, all right. So I get into yoga, new levels of meditation, and but I can still have a cynical side. And so I have a boss in the mortgages at some point that's like, you should check out The Secret. And I'm like, that's stupid or whatever, And so, of course, finally, by life circumstance, pain, I'm like, yeah, all right, what's The Secret about? And no matter what anybody thinks about The Secret, I do believe that it's the power of positive thinking, right? That is a theme throughout the Secret, and I love that about The Secret, if you've heard about that. And a lot of what they talk about to me is the power of positive thinking. And so,
and I'll just interrupt for a brief moment. The Secret is this quintessential spiritual movie that came out, I don't know, early 2000s, and it's about the law of attraction and manifestation. So just a little context.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you. So I'm into The Secret, and I had it on CD, and so I'm just like listening to it on CD all the time, everywhere I go, right? And loving it, and I'm all into yoga, and this woman, Dawn Marie, sees I'm in pain. Friend of mine, good friend of mine, and I'm at this point I'm in a lot of psychic pain, right? Because I ended up with this cash in the bank. I'm emotionally blown out. My life story arc is like this, is like I get clean and sober, and I'm like, oh, I need to start learning how to manage my emotions and deal with my emotions. I'd say from that point until 30, I'm still suppressing and taking in more emotions than I'm letting out. Get into my 30s, I finally figure out how to start healthily letting out emotions, okay? But I've still got a lot of emotions pent up over life. Divorce, parents dying, another failed relationship. It was the next failed relationship that like ripped the top off the bottle. And I was like, oh my God, like money's not filling the hole, relationships aren't filling the hole, like I can't turn to drugs and alcohol. I am anti big pharma, so I think there is a place for pharmaceuticals, but I'm like, I can't go down the pill route because I've already cashed in that ticket in my youth. And I'm crushed. And these emotions start coming out. And so next step for me, being kind of open-minded, is like church, some sort of church, deeper level spiritual work. So whether that's the Christian church or like, Buddhism or any of those, name it, right? Like I needed a place that I could go and start healing at a deeper level and have safe space. So I start going down the Hindu route, start doing satsangs and find a Hindu teacher, and I'm just going deep in meditation and healing, and I come across the Course in Miracles. We can talk about that too, but just to give you a picture of where I am. And I still have a cynical side though. So Dawn Marie sees I'm in pain. I'm going into these satsangs and just crying. Just like I'm crying every day. My heart is breaking open, if you want to say, right? I'm just letting out these emotions. And the great thing about this Hindu crew that I fell into it was mostly white middle-aged women, and they just loved me so much. There was no sexual shenanigans going on. It was just pure motherly, sisterly love. And my mother was kind of out of my life when I was a kid. I had no sisters. I grew up with a mountain man dad, and my brother's amazing, but he was just like hyper competitive brother. So I just knew, like, you compete your way to the top. You pull yourself up from the bootstraps. You are an island. The mountain man guys, they're like it solo.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
And you just needed a hug.
I just needed a hug, man. And so they just, for a couple of years, they just hugged me. It's a great way to say it. And I was like, it was amazing. But I started crying every day. I've completely lost track of where we are. I apologize, but I just want to say this. I was crying every day, and finally was like, oh my God, this is so amazing. I'm just letting out all these emotions. And fast forward, when you're not crying every day, all of a sudden, like, oh my God, am I closing up? Is my heart closing? But But anyway, Dawn Marie is one of these ladies at Satsang and this amazing spiritual group of ladies, man. They were just so powerful in my life. But she's like, hey, you should go check out this dude, Kyle Cease. And I was like, cynical side, no. When it's the thing you need most, it's like the brain says, no.
Who's this guy?
Who's this guy? Yeah, so Kyle Cease, anyway, holy mackerel, I've taken a very long route to get to Kyle. So Don Marie's like, hey, I've got a ticket to EOL. You should come check it out. And I was like, fine, I'll come check it out. So I go to one of Kyle's Evolving Out Louds in Los Angeles at the Ace Theater. It's like 2,000 people. But Kyle is like, how would I explain Kyle? You might be able to explain him better, but he's very much about like meditation, about healing. People might call it shadow work. There's all these different types of things, but it's like letting go and loving the moment and new levels of this, and a lot of it through meditation. I want to let you add something to it because you might be able to explain to the people listening, watching better.
I actually don't think I can because I don't know much about him, but from my brief glance at his website and from what you've shared, it sounds like he's a spiritual teacher into transformation, very much into the spiritual path of healing.
Yeah. And he's all about, shedding those layers to letting your true self come out. This is a lot of, I don't know, overused words these days, but it's very true. He's like, you know what, shed those layers. Like, you're amazing. Like, let go of what you think society wants for you, and just be you. New levels of you, right? And he's very big on the idea that there is no separation. And I don't know, it's very powerful. I'm probably doing, Kyle, if you watch or listen to this, I might be doing you a disservice. I apologize. But just know that I was all in on Kyle. So I started going to all his events. My mind's blown. I'm like, because I'd already been in a meditation. And he's like, start meditating an hour a day in the morning. And I was like, I could do that. And like a committed meditation for an hour a day for a couple of years, an hour a day in the morning. And these were not guided meditations. I'm not saying any type of meditation is better than the other, but I was focused on breath, quieting the mind, learning techniques to quiet the mind. I can literally, my mind can be running, and my mind will visually see those thoughts and move them and be like, we can come back to you, right? Which is pretty cool. I'm sure a lot of people can do that. But the other thing is, when you learn to let your thoughts come through at that level and not be driven by them, if that makes sense, because I think a lot of us are so reactionary to our thoughts, right? And he taught me to be able to sit there and let those thoughts come through and see them and just be like, yeah, it's just another thought. You don't have to move. And I don't know anybody who tries meditation in the beginning. It's like we have a hard time holding still and not. At the beginning, I would have a thought and would pull me out of the chair, right? It's like, oh, you know what I mean? And so to be able to learn or not have to react at that level, I don't know, I'm kind of going down a rabbit hole. I want to give you a minute to speak to that. Maybe you want to talk to that for a minute. Or
what's coming up for me is I've met a lot of spiritual people, and it seems like there's a few things in common with all of those people that I've met, in that before they become really spiritual, they go through the dark night of the soul. Things were good at one point, they start to fall apart, then the wheels fall off, then things catch fire, it gets really bad. And it's in that dark moment that they find spirituality or something that helps them, whether it's meditation, breath work, God, whatever it is that you want to call it. And through those modalities, which are so ancient, I mean, the monks have been doing it for years and years and years, it becomes a foundation for their life, but also for the next chapter. And I would love to talk about the next chapter for you, because we've gone from addicted to drugs and alcohol in high school. You graduate, you can either go to prison or you can go to a rehab center. Then it's professional snowboarder, DJ, success in retail commodities, success in the mortgage industry, rock bottom. What's next?
Yeah, what's next? Yeah. So I'm all in on Kyle Cease, obviously, and I'm doing this crazy, but I think, and looking back on it, it's like, yeah, it was kind of crazy meditation and in writing and all the things that go with it as well. There's so many tools out there that can empower us and or set us free and or help us have the best human existence we can is another way to say it. I mean, the human mind is it's a whole other side note. But one of the things that Kyle has you do, or you have an opportunity that I did with him, was called his the complete journey. And basically it's 15 or 20 exercises, to at the time I was like, what is my destiny? Like, what am I doing with my life? And I'm floundering at work and being the negative guy, which is killing me because I'm not a negative guy. And so fast forward, I'm in the middle of the complete journey, and some of the exercises it's a group of exercises that you inventory the 100 things you know, the 100 things you love, 100 things you understand, and 100 things you're good at. And the first 25 are easy, right? It's like, what do I love? Pepperoni pizza, or, as least judgmental as possible, or like women with black flowing hair in the wind. Like, get whatever you want, right? Like, write it down. But after that 25 on each of those lists, it's like, wow, I really gotta think about that and do some meditation around it. And there's meditation around those exercises. So you do this inventory, and then, things that I love are my hot cup of coffee or tea in the morning, that morning amazingness. Reading to my boys at school, making them breakfast as a single dad, taking them to soccer or whatever they happen to be in, swim lessons they were in. And I'm like, oh, this is interesting. Huh. Right? Like, these are the things that I love right now. You also, things I love, know, good at, understand, you put a dot next to the things that make you feel light or happy, and you don't put a dot next to the things that make you feel dark, right? So I'm a skilled individual. I'm good at a lot of things, and what became very clear was just because I'm good at it doesn't mean I need to do it, right? And so I have this moment of clarity. There's some other things in there, but I have this extreme moment of clarity of like, oh my gosh, like, I need to get my boys through school. Like, I just need to be available as a dad. Like, I need to quit my job. And that was such a blow to the ego, because at this time, I've got this money in the bank. I'm still at an age where it's like, I need to be adding to that pile. So my ego's like, yeah, the universe is like, I gave you this money. Like, you cannot work for a while and get your kids through school and be a stay-at-home dad, right? And I'm like, yeah, but I need to be kicking ass in business. I need to be adding to my pile. I need to, pile of money. My pile of money needs to be getting bigger than your imaginary pile of money that I think you have or whatever. And I was like, oh yeah, interesting. So next day I go into work. I go to my boss and I say, hey, I quit. I'm done. And he goes, we'll match whatever offer you have, right? And I'm like, no, you don't understand. I'm done. I'm quitting. I'm retiring. And he stole cold looked at me. It's one of the most vivid memories of my life. And he's like, I wish I could quit too.
Wow.
And I was just like, yeah, I'm doing the right thing, right? So I quit. And and I become a stay-at-home dad. I start teaching yoga somewhere in there too, which was super fun because being a yoga teacher gave me tremendous flexibility to prioritize availability for my kids. We'll hear the term holding space. You've heard that term, right? It's a great Encinitas, California term, holding space for people.
Big North County term.
Yeah, big North County term, holding space for you. So it became very clear my job was to hold space for my boys. And someone asked me the other day, like, what's holding space mean? And this is the way I will explain it to you, is that, my job was to be available for my boys. And so Waylon, my younger one, who's 21 now as we record this, was a bit more sensitive outwardly than Cooper, my older one. And so I would be sitting in the living room at home. Waylon would be in his room doing his homework, whatever he's doing. He would open the door to his room, look out, see I was there, and be like, I'm safe and it's good. And he would close the door. I was like, I was just being there and holding space for those boys, right? And it's like, yeah, get them to school, get their lunches made. Just support them as best I can. But that was next. So, man, that was a long answer.
I always say this, we love long answers on the Dare to Dream podcast.
Yeah.
And that was such a beautiful description of what holding space is. It's just being there, being present. Not even that you're needed, but that if you were to be needed, you can provide assistance.
Yeah, and non-judgmentally with no agenda.
Yes.
That's another key bit.
No agenda is non-negotiable for holding space. If you have an agenda, you're not holding space. You're trying to get something done.
You're trying to get something done, yeah.
Before we go into what you're doing today, because I want to make sure we get to that, because you are a heart-centered entrepreneur. Your company, like the parent company, is Be Love Media.
Correct.
I want to get to that because it's so cool. But what was it like? What ego dissolution did you have to do to go from successful businessman to being comfortable being a stay-at-home dad and realizing that this is what you actually needed and what your sons needed?
Yeah. So ask me that again. What did I need to go through? Was that or
how did your ego get out of the way? How did you let that happen?
Yeah, man, that, my friend, is a great question, and I will answer it like this. So, Greg, that is a good question. And I was like, how am I going to answer it? And I'm like, yeah. So I would say I'm a recovering A-type personality. So I think my A-typeness has been stripped away. A lot of people who know me would go, yeah, that's wishful thinking. It's just come down a bit, right? And I'm not saying A-type is bad at all, but it's like embrace who we are. But I just to say that I think as humans, I can think I've changed or I'm not this way. And it's like, oh no, you are. You're maybe just not as extreme as you were. Or I used to think I was not high maintenance as an employee in the loan business. I was delusional. Like my bosses were like, oh no, you're high maintenance, my friend. Funny. Anyway, I would say A-type or control issues, or what happens is Waylon and I are fighting at homework time. And I find myself yelling at him. He's in like, I don't know, 4th, 5th, 6th grade, 7th grade, I don't know, somewhere in there, right? The timeline gets fuzzy. But the punishment doesn't meet the crime. And what I mean by that is like I am overreacting to the fact that he's not getting his math done fast enough or right or getting the A's. And, through all this work that we do to self-actualize or grow or have a growth mindset, a thing that we will hear is that anger is the inverse of fear. Anger is, fear, not the inverse of fear. Anger is fear. It's just fear manifest, right?
It's often covering up the fear. It's the secondary emotion for what's really underneath.
Absolutely. And being involved in the 12-step modalities to the level that I am, that is squarely in my face. I'm like, all right, I can't hide from this anymore. What am I fearful of? Like, why am I overreacting this way? And why, like, Waylon would be like, I would be like, hey, Waylon, like, let's try your homework again. And he'd be like, no. I'd be like, Waylon, I swear this time I won't overreact. I won't yell, right? Won't make you cry. And he'd go, okay. And of course he'd be crying. At one time he's like sobbing as we're battling about homework, and he's just like, Dad, I just need a hug. And I was just like, man, like, what is going on in my brain, right? And I'll give you even a little bit more. I had moved this girl in, and she saw this interaction with my son one time, and I saw in her face, because I'm like nice and supportive in all these other ways, but my fear and anger is just erupting there, and I could see it. She's like, what have I moved in with? I was like, oh no, I got to sort this out, right? So, and I hate to admit this, so I get a couple anger books, and I was not, like, people are angry, so I don't want to overplay my anger, but just to see, it affected my son, and I saw it, and it was hard on me, obviously hard on him. So I get a book on anger, a couple books on anger, and then I start thinking about, fear and all this, and so I start praying and meditating. To answer your question, like, how did I get through it? I start praying and meditating about it, and I'm like, God, I need help seeing what I'm missing here, right? And what were my fears is what it comes down to. And it was like, oh my God, I'm concerned that Waylon won't get a scholarship. And so now I'm going to be financially, it's going to have financial implications. I want to be able to say, when people say, what does your son do? I'm like, oh, he's on the swim team. Oh, he's, getting A's or whatever, or, how is your son doing? I want to be able to say, oh, he's getting A's. And I realized in that moment that I was completely full of self-centered fear. I was hyper concerned, and he reflected on me as a father, right? And I was like, oh my gosh. And so all this ego deflation is happening at the same time. I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm very concerned how I'm perceived as far as being a business guy or this or that, or how much money do I have in the bank, or do people think I have in the bank, or all these things that I hate to admit, and that it's painful to talk about. Not painful, but I'm like, yeah, it can feel a little icky, right? I'll tell you one hard thing about inheriting that money too, is like, I always wanted to be a successful business guy. So to get money a different way was like a blow to the ego too. I couldn't say, like, yeah, I kicked ass and took names and I earned this, right? It was like, came to me a different way, which surprisingly, a normal person isn't going to care, if that makes sense. I'm giving you, again, a very long answer, and I'm glad this podcast likes long answers. But so my other son, we have tension another way. And I realize, like, Waylon needs a little bit of hands-off, flexibility, freedom to, like, find his way through school on his own terms. Cooper needed a little bit more stronger guardrails. So this prayer had dropped in, and it was like, God, how can I support your path for Cooper, setting aside my own selfish wants, desires, and fears? Because it's my own selfish wants, desires, and fears that skew everything. So it became a mantra. It's like, God, how can I support your path for Waylon, setting aside my own selfish wants, desires, and fears? And it, like, shifted everything. It was like, oh yeah, how does God or the world, how can I support their path? Letting go of how it affects me, my pocketbook, how I think people perceive me, things like that. if you want to speak to that, I have a little framework around that too. I can tell you, but you may have a question or a comment.
I'd love to hear the framework in a moment, but I think there's a really juicy nugget in there. And that, to me, it sounds like the switch that allowed you to go from in your ego, upset, yelling at your son, which is probably surprising to people because you're the yoga teacher, you're meditating, you're calm, cool, and collected. You're so outgoing and friendly. But it was simply shifting the focus from yourself to them. It's not about me anymore. What can I do? How can I help them become the men that they're supposed to be?
Yeah. Yeah, setting aside my own agenda.
And there's one more thing that really jumped out at me, and that you described this instance with Waylon when he's crying and he's saying, Dad, I just want a hug. And if we go back to what we were talking about earlier, that's what you just wanted, and you maybe didn't get that from your mountain man of a dad.
Yeah. Yeah. And you know what's interesting too is that when we're in our ego state or we're agitated, sometimes that cry for help or the raising of the white flag from the other party doesn't matter, right? It's just like it can even escalate it even more. It's like there's almost no way out. Sometimes it can feel like of that emotion, right? So to be gifted in that moment of, Dad, I just need a hug, and to hear it and be like, yeah, all right, I'm here to hug you and love you, versus like, hug? What the hell are you talking about? We got work to do. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I'm sure that just cut through all of it.
All of it. And so what a gift in that moment to really have, just to be the gift of that awareness. Yeah, go.
So you mentioned framework. Let's hear about the framework, and then let's spend the rest of today talking about what you're up to now.
Yeah.
Because it's so interesting.
Yeah, cool. So yeah, I've got, I did a bunch of other stuff, as I'm going through this tumultuous time, and I've got a few frameworks, and one is I did this thing with a Rod Stryker disciple. I don't know if you've ever heard of Rod Stryker, but he's got this, I wish I could remember the book right now. It's escaping me, but it's so powerful. But it basically is about how to find your human mission statement, or your Dharma code, he calls it. And so there's a yoga teacher locally named Josh Vincent, who's amazing. This guy's so powerful. He's got a brother named Ben Vincent who lives in Minnesota. Josh should have his brother Ben come down every year, and they do a workshop. So I've been going to it for a couple of years, and they have one where you do this workshop where you figure out your Dharma code, or what I like to call your human mission statement. And this is what through that weekend I came up with for me was, and I call it's my life framework: live open. So live open, inspire transformation, fearlessly good, serve the greater good, fearlessly serve the greater good, and then E, especially know you're loved. And more than just from like, oh, Greg loves me, or oh, love from humans, but like know that the universe loves me and has my back. So, live open. Like, I had a girlfriend once who told me, she's like, there's the secret life of Mischa, and I was like, yeah, that's not serving. Like, I just got to shed that fear and let people know where I am. Fearlessly serve the greater good. That can mean a lot of things to a lot of people, but it's like I'm willing to stand up for what's right. Inspire transformation. That's pretty much self-explanatory, but I like to lead by example, take that action, and hopefully other people are like, oh yeah, I can do that too, And then apply. So in that moment with Waylon, it's like apply, acknowledge, pause, pray, listen, yoke. And it's like I'm in a moment of turmoil here, and I need to acknowledge that. And I need to pause. And then I need to pray to whatever I believe in, whatever that is. Like, hey, God, I need some help here because I'm in turmoil and I've got a volatile situation with my son. And it's like, listen, Dad, I just need a hug. Yeah, okay, I hear you. And then yoke, oxen have the yoke. Yoke is also a yoga term, but it's like yoke can mean come together. Yoke can mean empower, execute. I like to think of execute like, okay, take action on that inspiration I've been given. Or what was the other word I had for it? I can't remember right now, but it's like empower. It's like empowering, right? Anyway, there you go. I have some others, but I'll let you talk for a minute.
The Y is for yoke, not to be confused with yell.
Yes, I
which
love
was
it.
the old
It's so good.
framework.
Yeah.
What you just said there about empowering, that feels like the perfect segue, because it feels like what you're doing now is empowering heart-centered entrepreneurs
Yeah.
to gain influence, to gain an audience, but to really gain the right audience.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for making that segue for me. Yeah. So, I love sales. I love marketing. Love all that. Obviously, I've been in it my whole life, and it's like, how do I come at it from that heart-centered space? How does it meet my life framework? Live open, inspired, transformation, fearlessly serve the greater good, and know I'm loved. And so I knew as I'm retired business guy, home loan officer or whatever, one day I would be inspired and the opportunity would come to jump back into entrepreneurship. And so as soon as Cooper had graduated high school, Waylon's about to graduate. And I'm like, hey, Waylon, I think I'm going to go jump back into some entrepreneurial endeavors now that you're about graduating. You got your girlfriend, you know what you're going to do for college. But understand that might not have the same time from me, because it might occupy some time. And he's like, Dad, don't worry about it. Like, I got my job, I got my girl, like, charge it, And so I dove headfirst. This is 3 or 4 or 5 years ago back in the entrepreneurial space, and always wanted to learn online marketing, and jumped into some crazy like $25,000 a year masterminds. Dove in way too fast. Started cutting checks, but fast forward to I was helping people get video testimonials for their business. So let's say you had somebody who liked your service and you're like, hey, I need that story told in an interview so we could create that testimonial. And I'm obviously open, easy to talk to. I can ask good questions. I had my customer story arc framework, and at the time I'm doing this, I still have a bunch of imposter syndrome. And so I'm like, am I adding value? Like, what am I doing? And keep in mind, I'm getting paid to get people's testimonials. I got like flown to Ireland. I'm getting flown across the United States. But I'm like, am I adding value? What am I doing? And in my sales days, I was very good at systemizing the process. So systemizing, getting the leads, converting those leads into interested parties, sales, right? Like systemizing it. Very, what's the process, and what do you say? When do you say it? And very scripted, literally with, scripts of what to say, when to say it, and so I used to listen to guys like Zig Ziglar as I was walking to work, or Brian Tracy. Or Brian Tracy seems to be having a new day in the sun too, which is super fun to see. But so as I'm, learning my sales chops, I'm just constantly have these Zig Ziglar, Brian Tracy, others going in the background. And so I've got this imposter syndrome, and I've got my perfect video testimonial system, my 5-step system for getting your customers to gladly do your selling for you. And that's the thing that I'm selling, right? And I have a friend who says, hey, Mischa, you need to teach my realtors how to get their customer stories and get them on video, because they need this content. And then I'm good at repurposing content too. And so he's like, teach my guys my people, my realtor audience, how to repurpose my content. I want to interview you for my podcast. I'm doing this thing. I want you to speak at it. And I'm like, no. Imposter syndrome. And then two things happen. I finally say yes. And right when I'm going to speak on his show, I get an email from Stacy Oliver, who is one of my customers, who I'm getting testimonials for and interviewing her customers and prospects and stuff like that. And I wake up to this email that says, hey, Mischa, you're the one who moves the needle in my business. I pay all these other people, and you're the one that drives the revenue. And I was like, what? I was like, oh my God, I'm adding value. Literally the next day or two, I speak on Ryan's show. It was called the Small Business Spotlight. And I crush it. And I create all this engagement and interest. I'm like, oh my God, like I've got a story to tell and I add value. I'm like, I had this thought, I need to go on a podcast tour, right? And so I do this post on Facebook and I say, hey, I'm going to go speak on podcasts about getting your customer video testimonials and how I can help do that. But in that process, I'm going to be creating the templates on what to say, the emails to send to the podcast host, how to find the podcast, all this stuff. I'm going to create all the collateral that's going to help me execute a podcast tour like I used to execute sales campaigns, right? And I'm like, who would want that information? And all these people were raising their hands saying, oh, I want that information. I'd want that information. I'd want that information. And I was like, oh my gosh, there's all these heart-centered entrepreneurs out there that need help getting their message out. And it's kind of my superpower. So I started this membership, this community called the Influence Army, where I teach people how to go on a podcast tour, how to find podcasts, how to, get on the podcast, what to say, when to say it, get all the stuff around it dialed in. And it's called the Influence Army. And sorry, I'm just, my brain is whirling right now. I'm just thinking of all the fun stuff I've got going on. But
let me jump in real quick.
Yeah, jump in, please.
It's really interesting that nothing changed except you got a text saying that you were adding value. It's not like you had recently released a new thing that was so much better than your old stuff. You just needed that external validation and almost that permission to go forth and have your real impact. And that really resonates with me. I find myself a lot of times asking for permission, even if it's not explicit. I'm like secretly putting ideas out there, waiting for someone to say, oh yeah, that's a good one. And then I'm like, yeah, I know it's a good idea. And then I do it. But you almost need that permission first. So that resonates a lot with me.
Yeah. And I love that point too. Thank you for highlighting that. And I knew something had changed for me at that moment when I committed to building this influence army to help heart-centered entrepreneurs increase their impact, their influence, and their income by going on what I like to call an influence tour, which starts by guest speaking on podcasts, right? And there's so many benefits to guest speaking on podcasts. There's like 7 main benefits and a hidden 8th. And really quick, there's the call to action. Obviously, you interview me at the end. Like now you're going to say, well, people are interested. Where can they find you? And I'm going to say, go to guestingguide.com and they can, get my thing on how to execute a profitable podcast tour, right? And I'm about to do a master class, a podcast guest speaking master class. So anybody could go to influencetour.com/go and register for this master class. But so you got the call to action. You've got the host. Great chance you'll recommend me to somebody. You're going to go, oh my gosh, Mischa, you're a great dude. I know somebody who needs to go on an influence tour. You'll introduce them to me. You might want to go on an influence tour. Then we've also got partnership opportunities where we can leverage each other's email lists. These are the benefits of going on a podcast tour. I'm hijacking the conversation. Thank you. And then we've got repurposing the content, building your brand. The reality is, if you commit to guest speaking on podcasts, what I like to say is, how would your life change and your business change if you guest spoke on 50 podcasts in 100 days? Like, you would be a different person at the end of that. Even if you only hit 20, even if you only hit 10, if you committed and went for it, you're going to have a transformation. Your business is going to have a transformation. Anyway, totally got sidetracked. But what was the question?
Yeah, that was it. That was perfect. It's what are you up to? How are you helping people today?
Yeah.
And I love what you've created, because everyone wants to speak on a podcast, or a lot of people want to speak on a podcast.
Yeah.
They want to sit down, fancy microphone, everything's all set up. They talk, they leave, they mic drop, but they don't want to reach out to people to be on podcasts. They don't want to create the templates. They don't want to do all of the stuff behind the scenes. So the fact that you've systematized that, created these processes, scripted it, it's easy. And then the second piece is, I love how you ask the question, what would be possible for your life, for your business, if you committed to this for 100 days? 50 podcasts, maybe you don't even get to 50, but there's so much power. Anyone who's listening to this will know that I love this. There's so much power in saying yes, saying that I'm going to do this thing. It's going to be uncomfortable. I'm going to get out of my comfort zone, probably sweat through a few shirts while I'm on the podcast tour, but your life will change. You'll meet the right people. Unexpected things will start happening. And there's so much beauty in just creating that commitment and saying yes.
Yeah, it's so good. And, you know, I've had people come through my influence army and who are in it who, I had this issue when I had that imposter syndrome. People were asking me to speak on their show, and I wouldn't reply because I was like, I don't know what to say, right? And now I've got my story bank, get your stories together framework, so you can tell the right stories at the right time and inspire the audience to action, right? Point is, I've had people come through who were like, I know I want to speak on podcasts, but like they'll say they want to, but they won't because they don't know what to say, when to say it, right? For example, to watch the transformations, Whitney's one, this guy Rick, he went from being, he crushes it now. He takes all the skills he learned from the influence army and now he like uses it in networking, right? It's helped him in all those facets of his life. What else can I say? I got, I'll get people like unsolicited. Alan was like, oh my God, I've been on 6 podcasts this month, right? And for me to be able to teach and inspire people to do that is so powerful. And I think my broader mission is like, I'm here to help heart-centered entrepreneurs get their messages out to change the world. Ultimately, that's what it's about. And so to see those things happen, to see students come in and start having that sort of impact and that transformation themselves is pretty awesome. Yeah.
And there's a lot of people out there, I'm one of them, who don't love social media. They don't love paid ads. They don't love funnels and building landing pages. And maybe they're good at it. To tie this back to what you said, you were really good at a lot of the stuff you did in the mortgage business. That was your zone of excellence, but it wasn't what you really wanted to do, what you were really great at, your zone of genius. And podcasting for so many people is the zone of genius, where it's easy, it's fun, you do it for free. And what a way to grow your impact. What was it? Your
influence, impact, income.
Yes. Fantastic. Yeah. So you said that people can go to guestingguide.com. What was the other place, and where else can people find and learn more about you, Mischa?
Yeah. Go to guestingguide.com. You can download my my guide on how to I think it's, sorry, you'd think I'd have this memorized, but go to guestingguide.com. I have a guide on how to execute and put on a profitable podcast guest speaking tour. So it's got how to find podcasts, how to find their emails, how to, email templates, the templates on how you invite yourself onto the podcast, all that kind of stuff, so they can go there and get that and let their minds run wild. And then I am doing a podcast guest speaking masterclass. I believe if you go to influencetour.com, you can register for the masterclass. And I'm going to be rolling those every month here right now. So go to influencetour.com. to answer your question there. Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah.
And we'll put everything in the show notes. It'll all be there.
Yeah.
Mischa, thank you so much for coming on. Thank you so much for coming into my life. Every time, as I mentioned, we hang out, I have energy. I'm excited. I think we're going to do some cool stuff together in the future.
Yeah. Thank you for having me and indulging me and let me talk a lot. I love it. Thank you.
Awesome. And thank you everyone for tuning in with us today. As always, we love you guys. If you liked this episode, please be sure to subscribe to the Dare to Dream podcast on YouTube. You want to make sure you don't miss out on any of the amazing episodes we're going to be coming out with in the future. And if you liked this video specifically, please give it a like, leave a comment, let us know what you loved. Thank you so much for being here. We love you guys.